In this video, I'm going to show you how to make pop-up drawings in 3 ways. Since we're doing 3 different techniques, I'm going to start by drawing 3 different drawings. They don't have to be anything special, and they're not going to be, that's for sure. I'm just going to do some kind of silly drawings here just to fill the space. Now I have my 3 drawings. Each one is going to be used for a separate technique. Now, for 2 of the techniques, we are going to need a strip of paper about 2 fingers wide. It also helps if your drawings are kind of small, or at least the size of your palm or smaller, because a lot of times anything bigger than a palm is going to end up floppy. So the smaller, the better. I'm not coloring these, but it definitely helps to color them before cutting them out, in case you end up getting outside of the lines. Coloring outside the lines is totally fine if you're going to cut it out. My biggest trick for cutting out small objects like this is to start at the corner and follow the shape until I can jump from one shape to the next. That way I get rid of all of this annoying paper as soon as possible, so it's not in my way while I'm cutting. This is a lot easier to manage than a whole page. Just go from one shape to the next and around. Boop. Then I can focus on smaller pieces. There we go. I'm going to do the same thing with my little cat here. Just cutting around and then going into my spaces here. When you do it this way, you only have to deal with some smaller, simpler shapes like a little triangle or maybe a wiggly piece kind of like between the head and the tail. But that's a lot easier than trying to do it with all that extra paper flopping around. There we go. And finally, cutting my heart out and getting rid of all that extra color from outside of the lines. Of course, I'm going to go ahead and quickly clean up my materials so I don't have all this trash in my way. Now, the first technique is definitely the simplest. I'm actually going to put a piece of paper back down because I cut a lot of my black outlines out, and it's hard to see with the paper when I've cut the outline out since I'm using white on white. Of course, if you have something colored and looking nice and neat, it's going to be a lot easier to see. Oops. The first technique just requires one of our pop-up backgrounds like I showed you in the other video. This is already popping out, so I can take whatever I would like and glue it wherever on here. Remember, just a dot, not a lot. Whoops. Elmer's glue is water-based, and so the smallest amount of glue possible dries the fastest, so you don't have to hold it as long. Now, this technique works really well if you have something taller or that you want to stay in one spot in your scene. Because it's glued to the background itself, it works great as settings, so things like trees or bushes, any furniture, that sort of thing. Now, the other 2 techniques I'm going to show you are awesome because you can move them around. They work almost like a figurine or a toy. So I'm going to cut that strip out and use this for both of them. I'm going to fold it in half because otherwise it's a little too long, and just cut on the line. The second simplest technique is almost identical to the step I just did. I'm simply going to fold my paper, but instead of cutting on the line, I'm going to use the bottom part as a stand and the top part to hold my pop-up. Now I'm going to fold this back down and make a note of where the crease is. If I go ahead and put my figure up at the top, not knowing where the crease is, they're going to be upside down. So I'm just going to fold this back down, knowing where the crease is, and glue my characters so their feet touch just at the bottom. If your character's feet go off the side, you're going to have to fold them and they won't fit. So I glue them with their feet just touching the bottom. Now this paper is way too big, so I can trim it down. Your paper only needs to be as tall as your character. If it's too tall, it looks kind of silly. If it's too short, it's going to fall over, and the weight of your character isn't going to hold it up. So the height of my character is the same as the length of the piece holding it down. And now I have a wonderful little pop-up kitty cat. The last technique is a little more difficult. We take our rectangle and lay it down sideways. I like to put my thumb in the middle so it looks kind of like a little butterfly, and just roll one side over my thumb. If I look at it from the side, it looks like a capital letter J. By rolling it, I'm not adding any creases, but I'm going to take my glue and put it right along the edge there. A few dots, because remember, least amount of glue to do the job. Okay, so just a few dots there. Next, I'm going to take the other side and roll it right over the top. I like to stick my fingers on the inside with my thumbs on the outside and hold for about 10 seconds or so, just to make sure everything is glued well. This is the only place where you're going to see the seam or where the paper overlaps. So that's where I like to glue my little character or item. That way you're looking at the character or the item instead of all the goofy seam. Now this works the same as the last one, where you just slide it down to the bottom and hold it there. If you end up with too much paper, it's a simple fix. We just trim right down to there, tuck our scissors underneath. All right, come on, buddy. And cut around in a circle. Now I'm sure that you could do a better job once yours is dry, unlike mine. But this is another technique for creating a figure that will stay up on its own. And finally, using these stand-up figures, you can have one that stays in place and two that you can move around and kind of play around with. Okay, get down from there. Enjoy!